Most police will tell you they've seen it all. Eerily, sometimes those events will extend to the paranormal. Recently, policeone.com asked their audience to share the most frightening, strange or unexplained thing they had witnessed in their career, and their responses were unnerving and sometimes shocking. Here are some of those bizarre experiences. Creepy callouts. Several years ago, an officer called Meredith Shearman took a 911 call from a family reporting that their teenage daughter was possessed. They claimed there was no possibility of drugs or history of mental health issues, which of course Shearman had trouble believing. Family members were reportedly holding the girl down, and Shearman could hear two people screaming at each other in the background. She asked the caller to tell whoever it was yelling at the daughter to stop. The caller said, "It's her." The officer then responded that she knew it was her, but whoever was yelling back at her at the same time should stop. The caller once again said, "It's her," both voices. After 25 years in the force, it was the creepiest thing Shearman had ever heard. Human cruelty is one thing, but she described this as a different kind of evil. She was clearly hearing a young girl screaming, alternated with an adult male yelling back, and while she couldn't understand either language, they were clearly two different voices. The family were adamant that both voices were coming from the daughter at the same time. Later, as Shearman's lieutenant listened to the tape, he stared at her in disbelief. Police officer Dalton Hostetler remembered calls for service coming from a vacant household twice a night over about a week. The pleading voice on the phone sounded like a frail elderly woman with Alzheimer's. Her barely audible plea was, please help," accompanied by coughing. However, the number was totally unresponsive to police callbacks. Hostetler confirmed with his shift sergeant that the empty house's last resident was a daughter caring for her mother, who finally passed away from stage 2 lung cancer. The mysterious calls sent a shiver down his spine. Police officer Josh David remembers being called to a burglary in progress during daylight hours. The owner was in his kitchen and heard someone running up his wooden stairs to the 3rd floor. David set up a perimeter around the house and entered with a police dog, just as a perimeter officer observed a hand pull a curtain back on the top floor and relayed the information to him. David called for backup, thinking that surely they would be making an apprehension. However, nobody was found. His officer was 100% certain of what he saw, while the homeowner was confident he heard the heavy footsteps running up 12 steps. Hauntedselves. Marco Castillo had seen a lot of things during his career, but the strangest occurrence was witnessed by other officers and a dispatcher. One evening he had brought in a man for domestic violence who was a bit rowdy, so he was assisted in the booking by the sergeant and another patrolman. During the process, he glanced into cell number 1. There was a man in there with a short haircut and glasses and wearing a white t-shirt, just staring at them. Castillo ignored the man in the hope that he didn't start banging on the window, demanding a phone call or whatever. After finishing the booking process, he escorted the new detainee to his cell, walking past cell number 1. The man in the cell continued standing there without saying a word or moving. Castillo and the other 2 officers then left booking to attend to other duties. Sometime later, his sergeant asked him to check the paperwork for the prisoners as to whether any were ready to transport to the county jail. Heading into the booking area with the paperwork, he prepared to do a head count and was shocked to find that cell number 1 was empty. Both in a panic, he and the sergeant started making phone calls to the detectives to check if they had moved or released the man. They all replied they hadn't gone into booking at all. Castillo then checked the computer and paperwork again, finding that the head count was accurate. No one had actually been placed in cell number 1. The officers then went to the dispatch office to check the surveillance video in the booking area. They rewound the footage to where Castillo could be seen booking his prisoner, and fast-forwarded it to the point in the video where they all walked out. As soon as they walked past the door, the man in cell number 1 blinked out of existence. When the shocked officers tried to transfer the video to a DVD and USB drive, the man in the cell did not appear at all. The station workers still hear and see suggestions of the man's presence. Sometimes prisoners in nearby cells can be seen talking to someone in the direction of cell number 1, even though it is actually empty. To this day, officers are wary of going into booking alone. Another experience was reported by police officer Scott Rallison. Working at the jail, while doing his watch tour, he was heading into the medical area when he heard two people having a distinct conversation. He assumed they were two inmates in a cell talking. He went to the first cell and found no names on the door, so didn't look inside. On the next door, there was one name, so he opened the hatch to check inside, and there was an occupant. He was just about to close the man's hatch when the prisoner asked Rollison if he could move his neighbours over because he was alone and would appreciate some company. Rollison then went back to the previous door and checked in the window just in case someone had neglected putting the names on the door. On looking inside, he found that nobody was in the cell. Returning to the man in the other cell, he asked him if he had heard people talking, and he declared yes, they had been talking a lot. The officer informed him that there was nobody next door and made a hasty exit. Spooky patrols. Arthur Rigsby reported that one year his department began receiving complaints of headstones being toppled in the city cemetery during Halloween. The chief advised officers on the midnight shift to spend any extra time around the cemetery to catch the vandals causing damage. Rigsby found a good hidden but well-lit observation point nearby where he would regularly stop and check the site with his binoculars, patrolling the cemetery at the start and end of his shift. One night, when observing the cemetery, he spotted something that resembled a cat walking on its hind legs. He watched the strange creature walk approximately 10 feet between the headstones and then lost sight of it. Rushing to the area in his patrol car, he turned on his spotlight and strongest beams. He found nothing but a track through the dew on the grass, which came to an abrupt end at a headstone. To this day, he remembers how the being moved and its outline in his binoculars. Although very familiar with all the animals in his area, he has never seen anything like it before or since. TJ Riggs works on county roads and at 3 a.m. one night had a call of nature in a remote location. He turned down a dark gravel road and started his business. However, unnervingly, he felt like someone was watching him. He looked towards the rear bumper of his vehicle and saw a shadowy figure standing about 20 feet beyond. Still unfinished, he zipped up and yelled out to what he thought was a person, but received no reply. He started to apologise to the mysterious figure, thinking that this may be the nearby landowner offended by his action, but still no response. Deciding to confront them head-on, Riggs then demanded that they show their hands and identify themselves, but again no answer. Finally, he used his torch to see who it was, but as the light passed over the area, the figure was nowhere to be seen. Keeping in mind that the whole incident had taken about 20 seconds, he thought it bizarre that, as he looked around, he heard no running through the brush. He turned to get back into his car, taking one last look back, and to his horror saw the shadowy figure moving towards him from where he last saw it. He very quickly jumped into his car and sped off, knowing that he had no lines of defence against this spirit.